All right, I'm gonna save what I'm gonna go to for later, but I'm going live because I had noticed when I went live before, it seems I had missed some comments. So I wanted to make a chance to go over those real fast before we start making this playlist and stuff. So I just want to take today before I end up going to work and anything. Fuck this up. Any extra questions or anything? So this is just a live for like any extra question, any extra insights, any extra things. I just want to talk about some interesting stuff. Now, I want to talk about this interesting app that I'm pretty sure a lot of people probably seen, but it's an app made by Dante Fortson, and it basically has a lot of historical evidences, right? Anyone can say what they want to say about anyone, right? But evidence is evidence, right? But I think that these type of evidences are important, and they have a lot of useful tools for stuff that we may need to go over and everything. But it has some very deep stuff in time frames where events happen, where a lot of events happen. But that was a question about a culture. The reason why I'm not doing the starting the playlist now today, because there was a question about a culture that's ancient, like ancient pre-Semitic culture and stuff like that. They were asking about like the skull shape. And I'm gonna touch a little bit on that before we get on some other stuff. So let me actually first point out something. It had to do, and there's a lot of questions on the Natufian, and not a lot of people go over the details of the Natufian. But I did point out something just recently from a video that we were going over. Let me point that out real fast. It was just a video for clarity that I was making, and I put a little thing in this video. So the video is called, basically, it was a live rebuttal to all saying tone or language or religion, right? Ethnics, right? SC and all that, right? Defines a people, because some people try to say that someone's skin tone defines a people, and some people try to say a language defines a people, and some people say a religion defines a people. Those are just culture elements, right? It doesn't define them genetically, right? So that's something that's actually important to know. Oh yeah, I gotta make sure I disable this because some of those people on Discord is something else, but the ones that are in the holy conversation as well. All right. The reason why, because a certain source here, right? I talk about ancient culture right here from Israel. For example, the team analyzed DNA from two groups, right? 6 pre-Neolithic Natufians from about 13,000 years ago, and 2 pre-pottery Neolithic people from about 9,000 years ago. And they just talk about the genetics and everything, what was in them and everything. And they know they're in the Levant, right? They know they're a Levantan culture. That means they're obviously Eurasian. They talk about how some of the groups have ties to Africans. We had talked about that before, because some people say those that are in that Levant area are not tied to Africans. And we said, yes, they are. They obviously have tied to Africa, right? A lot of people say all people came from Africa, right? We talk about that if we want to, but we know that these ones do have ties to Africans, though they are Levantan, all right? We also understand that this group is going to be a very important group for basically developing different cultures of southern sub-Saharan Africa and different areas of Africa, which is going from the Middle East, right from the Natufian culture and everything. But what's also interesting about it is something that I had pointed out earlier with this group of the Natufian and everything. For example, here, let me just point it out real fast. It was a basically independent researcher that had did some research and had found out some very interesting things, and had pointed out a combination when looking at a couple different cultures. For example, taking in different ones like the idea of like Abraham, and then looking at real ancient cultures like the Sumerians and Natufians and stuff like that, and then comparing those and kind of get a good understanding on what's happening with these cultures. But what he did notice when he took one of the cultures of the Natufians, he found out something about them. Let me just point it out here. All right. Let me just make sure I got that thing enabled. All right. All right. So what's interesting here that we can actually see when we think about some things of it. I already know that when they're looking at the Natufians, they connect them with, as they say, of an E haplogroup, and they say it has connection with Africans and whatnot, right? So that's kind of interesting with that. But what I want to point out real fast is a little bit about what's said head shapes and a couple things, because he was asking about the head shape, and not a lot of people ask about that, but it's definitely something that it needs a second to go over. You need a second. So let me just point that out when it comes to that. But there's a couple of different things that's really interested on it. But here's where it becomes really interesting when we're looking at the skulls and stuff. So it talks about Dorothy Garrod and everything. So this is one thing that's factual that we know without a doubt, that Dorothy Garrod did find the Natufians, and they will say in 1928, right? It says, and it just talks about it is not surprising that she discovered, she says, a genetic admixture of European Caucasian, and it says Doli Kosovatic Ethiopian Negroes. So that's what makes it really interesting when looking at the Natufian. This was something that we had talked about before, of the interesting combination of these groups of the Natufian. So when they're talking about the skulls and all those things in combination, right? And summary of the highlight of it, it just says there are many factors that point to Ethiopia as the Natufian homeland. Now, that's where you got to go deeper into that understanding. But we know that, what way is it going? Is it going from the Natufian are the youngest and there's something older than them? Or is it that the Natufian are the oldest and the modern Ethiopians are younger than them? That's what is being compared. The modern Ethiopians have a similarity to Natufians. That's what's important. It says there are many factors that point to Ethiopia as the Natufian homeland, right? It says including DNA. It says distinctive dolichophatic enlarged skulls, right? That's really interesting when you get a little understanding of the background behind dolichophatic skulls and everything, and how they talk about who usually has those skulls and whatnot. But it is mentioned that Natufians do have those same skull shapes, yes. Natufian descendants start farming in the Levant. It says Natufians became well known as Levant's first farmers. So that's something that we do know about. Natufians obviously becoming the first farmers. There's really interesting stuff, I would say, when looking at that. And then, you can get a good understanding on what is dolichophatic and different groups that are also seen like that. And then basically some interesting definitions that basically gives you basically a long or nice summary of what they will look like. So I guess I just want to answer that real fast, that, yeah, it's mentioned that Natufians have that dolichophatic trait. That's why it's important to note that they have early on an E1B1 there, and they would have later on also some other E groups that would come from there that we'll see in the PPNB culture. So those are, yes, that is something that's important to note. But skull shape tells us a little bit. It tells us I'll just say that real fast. That skull shape does tell us a very interesting story. It's not going to give us a full picture, but we do consider it. These ones do have that type of skull shape, the dolichophatic. Just to make that clear real fast. And if there's any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to, like I said, we're going to move to the next thing. And the next thing is going to be getting into the time of Assyria, after Assyria. So after Assyria's events, Babylon events, and a couple things that's going to happen. And then we're going to work our way to the New Testament. Because I got some things we gotta go over as we move forward to the next thing as time is at hand, no doubt. But I'm just gonna kind of like wait a little bit and scroll because it's important that what's the word I'm looking for? It's important that we do realize that we have the opportunity to really expand on truth, on real information, real information, to be able not to go back to like 19 1800 style doctrines, right? But actually like having like a nice solid foot on like the original doctrines, because from this point here we can still find origins. We can still find origins, right? So original messages that were given a long time ago. So just to be able to answer that, because that's kind of like an extra thought, and I'm gonna just leave it like that. So just pointing out that the Natufians did have some Doli Cosophatic skulls, and they did have ties to some African groups. And there's a lot of information on them, on where they were at, right? We know, like we said, we went over this a few times, but just to get a nice understanding, we have verified that in the Natufian group, they would have been that Syrian group. That's why when you read the Bible, it talks about Israel saying, I was first a Syrian, right? Or Aram, right? Of that saying, that saying in Deuteronomy, right? And then they went into Egypt. They went to the areas of Egypt. That's just in a sense telling you ancient roots. That's really deep how far it goes back, right? Because throughout the beginning of the scriptures, right, it's not giving you pinpoint numbers. That's one of the biggest things that a lot of people have to understand. Before Abraham, a lot of stuff you're not getting pinpoints. You're starting to get what we have seen as a genetic curve, which some people also talk about, basically a collection of the evidence of how the tribes would have been there. And when I say the tribes, it's like when you get those numbers, you got to understand if that's going to be telling you if that's the age of the person or the age of that tribe of that person, right? If he had more generations than that. So that means you got to times that. So that might be actually those ages in Genesis has to be times. That's what we've been looking at very carefully, because it all starts to make sense too, even when you look at the records, right? The records of Babylon alone stretch back, right? And we got kings that a lot of correlations all the way back. So like you look at it and you realize that things that go, what's the best way to put it? Like 3,000 things that hits about 3,000 BC, right? Because things like 3,000 BC, 2,000 BC is like compression of history, a massive compression of true history. So, but anything before that, that's going to be where you got to understand the exaggeration, what's going on with the exaggeration and stuff. That's for those that can look through the veil, right? If you can look through the veil, you can see where it actually ends, because as long as you know the nodes, these are all, like you see these ends of the tree right here, those are nodes. No one cares about these numbers here. No one cares about these numbers here, because they can literally put any number they want. They can put any number they want. The only time that you want to start caring about these numbers when they start looking under 3,000 years ago, right? 3,000, 4,000 years ago. That's when you want to start getting a pinpoint, compressing those numbers and everything. Because that's when you're starting to either wonder, are you actually getting the truth from their understanding of the strata fields, right? Of those different layers and everything. You got to understand. Or even in the sense of their mutations, right? So that's where the complexion of basically proving where they all tie in the reality of the fossils and the actual record. That's one of the biggest things. And imagine trying to do it with actually using the real record of E1B1A. I'll guarantee you that almost every academic paper is using invisible numbers, and it's something that's not even there, because they don't even use the real actual culture, the real culture finds. That's something that's actually important. And you can't just look at a culture. Like, for example, if I got, let's say let's say Scythians. Let's say I got Scythians all the way into BC time, and then all of a sudden I got E group in the Scythians in AD time. I can't say that E groups are now Scythians. I guys realize when they jumped in that group. So that means if I got E1B1A in the Bronze Age and Bantus, I gotta realize who's in that culture, right? But we don't have E1B1A in the Bronze Age. We have E1B1A in the Iron Age in the Bantus, but we got E1B1B in the Bronze Age in the Bantus. So it's like the details is very important. Certain details actually tells a major key, major stuff that is important to know. Major stuff that's important to know, I would say, no doubt. All right, so I'll just leave it like that. So when it comes to basically the biblical narrative, when you're connecting culture and genetics and you want to make that a reality, that's going to take some pinpoint. It's going to take a little pinpoints. We got some pinpoints. We got some stuff we're going to go over and whatnot. We got some stuff we're going to go over in a little bit. I got some stuff we're going to go over. Now, this is something I'm going to go over, but I'm not going to go over right now. But I want to talk about this right here. It's going to be something we're going to go over. But we can't just talk about it right now, even though I want to. I really do. I really do want to talk about this because a lot of people, I don't know why they're not talking about this fine, but to find this is kind of going to be really important to understand of what's happening in the reality of life, pretty much the best way to put it. The best way to put it. But this is actually something that I think is going to be very important. That actually is going to talk about what was going on with the Jews in the not the barbarian invasion, but Roman invasion right after the Greek invasion, right? So it's going to be something that is going to be worth going over. Not yet though. But so today we're just leaving it as a live, as if there's any questions or anything else. If there's any questions on maybe something we went over or something that's not understood that we have went over, or why is it that we do recommend that anyone who's studying the biblical narrative also should probably look at genetics too and consider that. Even if you're a young earth creationist or not a young earth creationist, I do recommend looking into genetics because it might set your perspective on the clarity of the reality that we live in, because you can't deny it, right? You can't deny the blood. You can't say it doesn't exist, right? But we know it exists. So we want to find the reality of the scriptures. We got to find the reality of the people, right? As it said, even of Messiah, right? Not of just water, but of blood, right? Very, very, very deep, very, very deep stuff. So that's just an element. That's just one element, though. That's just one element that we got to connect, right? It's not all about blood, but it's a major piece that's going to tie a couple things together. It's going to be very important. So that's what we're going to be moving into. Let's see. All right. So with that, that's all I got for today. It's just a random live. Nothing much today. I'll leave it like that. See what time it is. I'll end it at the 20-minute mark. So one more minute. Nothing much today. Not really going over a source today. Just answering a little question. And if there's any other questions, we'll go over that. Other than that, that's all I got for now. That's all I got for now. All right. But I'll just wait a little bit, scroll, and we will end it there. So we got some stuff we'll go over soon. We got some stuff we're gonna get into and go over. We got some stuff we're gonna get into and we're gonna go over. Just for the truth's sake. Just for the truth's sake. All right. So with that, family, if you're wondering what's coming, I'll just summarize it like this. I plan to get into the massive events of the events that are very prophetic, right? The events after the 2,300-day prophecy, right? After the Maccabean revolts and stuff like that. Those events, and also the events that circle around after the Babylonian invasions and stuff, have a lot of pinpoint information on it because I went very deep into the Babylonian invasions of the Israelites, and I basically try to synchronize the kings of Israel with the exact time frame of the Babylonians. And it's really interesting when seeing it all align, and it brings an interesting reality. But there are some interesting finds of Israelites around these nations and stuff. So it's kind of interesting when putting those together. So basically, the reason why we're doing that because we're going to build the story up from there all the way to the time of the first century. So that's the goal. So that's why we have to know the roots, because guess what? They're there and they're available to be known. That's why we can know the roots. Even the scripture said, right? Judge no thing until all things are revealed. How can all things be revealed unless we come together? So with that, may you be blessed, may you be beloved, and amen, family.